What up, family? It's Ray J back with another video. And this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be another very important day as we have CPI data coming out. I'm going to be breaking down some other pieces of data that give me a view on CPI, and I'll talk about how it could affect the markets. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I talk about how CPI may end up affecting the markets based off the data we're seeing, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 6 free stocks. If you deposit $500 into the account, you're guaranteed 20 free stocks plus 6 months of level 2 data. And putting in $25,000 or more guarantees you 70 free stocks plus 12 months of level 2 data. The offer ends in just 7 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. So we got another very monstrous day for SPY and the QQQ as both of them ended up ripping to the moon, reaching the resistance levels I mentioned in my earlier video. However, when it comes to Tesla, this thing ended up underperforming because we had quite a bit of bad news that came out from Bernstein, from different analysts, and also because of some moves Tesla has made. I broke down the details about why this happened in my second video of the day. So if you're more interested in learning about all the details, you could check that out. I will just briefly cover them in this video. But I want to focus more on tomorrow and why tomorrow is going to be very pivotal for the markets and Tesla, as we have some very important data coming out. So for tomorrow, which is going to be Tuesday, an hour before the market opens, we have CPI data coming out. The expectation is for CPI year over year for all items to be 3.1%. I'm going to be looking at that very carefully. For core CPI year over year, we want this to be at around 4% or below that, right? So those are the two expectations which are going to be the most important. Let me note that of all the data I'm going to show you, I don't fully trust anything, to be honest with you. I know that this data is manipulated. I know you can't truly just solely believe everything you're seeing because there's lots of manipulation. There are lots of like different narratives and different agendas that different people behind this data could have. My view, however, is that despite that, it's very important to just look at the data, what it suggests, because it's still going to affect the markets, and the market will move based off this. And that's why it's very important to still take these numbers seriously. All right, so what's going on with all these numbers? What's going on with the markets? Let me give you guys some context. When it comes to SPY, okay, something interesting is going on. We have some very high puts to call ratios every single Friday for the rest of the year. For December 15th, this Friday, we have a 2.45 puts to call ratio. We have over 4 million puts expiring and just under 2 million calls. The majority of people think there's going to be a sell off coming. They're loading up on the puts. They were hedging in the past with this. The question is, will the market makers give them a victory finally? Will the market tank? Or is the market going to continue to squeeze more shorts? If I was a market maker, I would probably do that, to be honest with you. But just to be safe, it's going to depend on CPI and other factors. Now, the week after, or for next week on Friday, we have a 3.22 puts to call ratio, which is relatively high, 600,000 puts and just under 200,000 calls. That's relatively high too. And then for the last week of December, we have over a million puts expiring and just under 600,000 calls with a 1.52 puts to call ratio. So this is all very interesting. Lots of puts are still out there. Most of them are out of the money, but the question is, will we just continue to see shorts being squeezed? Now, that's going to depend on CPI. And I have some data that gives us some insights on what CPI could look like. So right here, I have CPI versus the crude futures. And this is very important because you can see there's a correlation between the charts. So as CPI and crude oil were moving together, they pumped together for many years, came down together, pumps together, traded sideways together, came down, up, down, up, down. They came up together before coming back down. But what's good about this chart is you can see that they have a tendency of being correlated because energy makes up a big sector in CPI and it ends up affecting so many different industries. So, with that being said, here's what's good about this. The CPI data that's coming out tomorrow is going to be for November. The latest CPI that came out was for October. Tomorrow, November's data is coming out. But we already have the data on crude for November. So let me just show you the chart right here. If you look at starting from September, okay, you'll notice that crude was at 89, CPI was at 3.69. Okay, remember those numbers. For October, CPI came down, so did crude. Crude was at 85, CPI was at 3.23. So they came down together a bit. For November, CPI is coming out tomorrow, but crude also is already down to about 77.35 for November. And as of right now for December, it's at 71.88. My point is for November, crude oil came down. We know the data is out there already. But for CPI, I mean, I don't know for sure yet until the data comes out, but typically CPI follows the trend, and there's a very good chance that that could end up happening. Now, on top of all of that, when we look at the data, CPI has been on a big downtrend. It's been downtrending and downtrending and downtrending. Core has been a little bit more sticky, especially over the last few months, but they've been downtrending. Now, we have an interesting trend right here. I'm going to show you why this is very important. Because when you look at the gas prices, this is the all grades, all formulations of retail gas. This is dollars per gallon. You'll notice something very interesting. So, generally, when gas goes up or gas goes down, we tend to see CPI follow. So, for example, look at the last like 4 to 5 months. You could even use the whole year as a reference, but I'm just going to use the last few months. So, gas for June was at 3.68. That's what the average price was, according to the data. And then for July, it went up to 3.71, a 13-cent increase. So, gas went up a little bit in July. CPI also went up in July, right? Then, after that, in August, gas went up by about, this is like 24 cents. Gas went up again in August. CPI also went up again in August. You guys can see this right here. Then what happened in September, it was basically the same. It was almost exactly the same basically in September. When you look at CPI in September was almost the same as that of August. And then in October, you go to October, CPI went down finally. It dropped 24 cents, the first drop we saw in a couple of months. After gas prices dropped a bit in October of 2023, what happened to CPI? CPI also dropped in October for the first time. And then here's where things get serious. For November, CPI is not out yet, but look what happened to gas prices. We got a 30-cent drop, the biggest drop we saw in the entire year for the month over month data, meaning between months, we never saw CPI drop more than 30 cents until November of this year. We had a big drop in gas prices for November, according to the data. With that happening, do you think that the CPI is going to follow the same trend again? There's a good chance it might end up doing so, which is good for the data. This is another positive factor. The market is pricing in a Fed skip again. The market thinks the Fed is going to skip. That, in my opinion, is priced in, but the CPI is not priced in. We'll see how that ends up affecting the markets. The fear and greed index is currently at greed. We're not at extremes yet. Other indicators are at these extremes, but this one is not quite there yet. So there is the possibility maybe we pump a little bit more. As far as Tesla goes, I'm just going to go be very brief with this. The news is saying that Tesla's cutting prices again, but in a different way. They're basically trying to incentivize more buyers to come in, and they could get almost $4,000 off the several Model Ys. But on top of that, we're seeing incentives amounting at about 8% of the transaction price because Tesla's starting to offer $4,000 off Model Ys plus 6 months of free supercharging, basically, right? So the point is, Tesla is doing things to try to get demand up because demand could be slowing down because of the high interest rates, and the current interest rates are affecting them. They're having a big effect on Tesla, their ability to sell cars. So there's some concerns amongst investors as a result of this. That is why the news has come out that Bernstein is saying Tesla could drop all the way down to 150 a share. I do agree with the point that they made that yes, Tesla is going to have a harder time selling cars amidst the higher interest rates and such. Yes, there is truth behind that. However, it's not the end of the world because Tesla is known for being able to prevail, and with these incentives, they could still bring their sales up. And the data I saw in China and these other places suggest that Tesla will likely meet their end of the year target. So I'm still seeing some good news for Tesla. It's not the end of the world. I also want to add that if this person is saying, "Oh, it's going to drop to $150 a share," I don't believe it because we haven't even seen this thing break 200 yet. Let's see it lose 200, then let's talk about 150. We're still very close to 240. We're not even close to 150. Let's not make predictions like that because who knows what's going to happen once Tesla hits, like, for example, 200 if we end up bouncing there or not. So we haven't even broken 200. Let's not worry about 250 yet. These I'm sorry, we haven't broken 200, so let's not worry about 150 yet. So don't worry about what these analysts are saying. They're just trying to get clicks, trying to get views, and then they want Tesla to drop so they can start buying in at much lower prices. As far as Tesla goes, none of the data really matters that much, which I typically go over because it's a CPI day. So with low volume at about 98 million, it's dropping on low volume, which is still a decent sign. So as far as Tesla goes, let me just mention that it's going to depend on CPI, and here's where things become very serious. So in my opinion, I think core is going to be at 3.9% or below that, very close to what the forecast and consensus are, if not below it. I think CPI year over year is going to be, so we're expecting it to be 3.1%. I think it's going to be 3% or 2.9%. If we get 3%, that's going to be bullish. The market could pop. If it's 2.9%, that's going to be very bullish because the Fed's target is a 2% inflation rate. If we're backing the twos, the market's going to celebrate most likely. And this is a perfect reason for the shorts to try to get squeezed. This is what the market makers could use to squeeze the shorts, and it's another possibility. So if we get a low CPI, if it's below 3% or 2.9%, right, Tesla could push back up to 244 and try to make its way back into this wedge. I do want to note that there are external pieces of factors, pieces of news that affects Tesla, so I can't always predict everything on the news, but if we just ignore that factor, CPI could bring Tesla back up into this wedge. If CPI is hot, for example, if it's hotter than expected, Tesla could come down to this imbalance at 233, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that there's a excuse me. I think there's a good chance Tesla might try to bounce back into this wedge as long as there's no like very bad piece of news. Tesla could bounce tomorrow most likely and see a very nice move. If Tesla breaks this white trend line, we could be pushing for 247 and see a big squeeze. I could see Tesla bouncing from here. And I think that there's a good chance of that happening. We also have a nice double bottom like formation that's kind of like forming here. Would like to see it come right back up, and that would be very good for the share price. So watch resistance at 240, 242. Then we have 244. This 246 to 247 area, and if we break that, then 250 is next. For support, watch 238. So we have 236 and beyond that. All right, guys. So with that being said, I favor the upside. I think Tesla's going to likely try to bounce alongside many different stocks out there. I'm going to be looking for a bounce, and I think that there's a very good chance of that potentially happening. What about for SPY? What do I think SPY is going to do? SPY pumped more today. Could it be because they want retail to suspect it's a trap? Could it be because Wall Street is buying in because they know CPI is going to be decent? I don't truly know, guys. But what I can tell you is that even though I'm not a fortune teller, I can't promise what's going to happen in the future. And even though I wouldn't bet my entire portfolio on CPI and such, which is why I warned you guys about risk management and important factors like that, I still favor the upside. I still think the market has upside coming, and I still favor that greatly. If CPI is hotter than expected, watch for 458, then 456. If CPI is as expected or below expectations, 465 and 467 are levels to watch for. What do I predict is going to happen? I think SPY is going to make its way up to 467 within 2 weeks. If CPI is 3%, watch for 465. If it's below that and at 2.9%, 467 or above is coming. We're going to see the market just continue to squeeze shorts most likely. I still favor that view. On the QQQ, if we're bearish, you want to see it come down below 390. If we're bullish, you want to see it break out above 396.5 and then push for 400. What do I think is going to happen? I think we're going to see 400. I still favor the upside. I think it's more probable based off the data that I was looking at. On Nvda, now Nvda could get a temporary move to the upside. It was looking kind of weak, but we haven't broken below the blue trend line right here. Plus, don't forget about this imbalance around this 480 area. So technically, we are making higher highs and higher lows. But we had this low here, we had this higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. Now we need to see this thing try to bounce and make a follow through move. So for Nvidia, could we be forming a bull flag? Are we about to like break out from here? If we're bullish, you want to see it try to get back above 475 and try to break this top right here where the wick is, then eventually fill this imbalance. If we're bearish, you want to see it come back down and lose this blue trend line and come back down below, this 457 area to turn bearish. My gut tells me Nvidia is going to try to bounce thanks to the CPI, and we might see it try to get back to at least 472. And I still think 480 is a possibility, but just to be safe, we'll have to see what CPI looks like. My gut tells me it's going to be decent, and we'll just have to see. For Apple, we have a nice looking structure, right? You could argue that there are two possibilities. If Apple is bearish, watch it lose 191. If we're bullish, you want to see it break above 195. My gut tells me it might try to make its way up here as we have an unfilled gap, and we may try to retest this wedge. Apple might try to push back up in a surprise move and try to catch a lot of these investors off guard. So I still anticipate a little pop up in this gap to get filled. And I think that's very probable for Apple. With that being said, guys, I'm going to try to end the video by just going over a couple of tickers real quick. Let me note that Neo, I know that a lot of people don't like Neo. I know they say things about it, which is completely understandable, but it is a fun chart that could be traded because on the weekly, we've been holding $7 again, our key supports, and there's a clear, accumulation that is developing on the chart, which could be very, very good for swinging. I think I see upside for 2024 coming, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see this thing start breaking out soon. On the IWM, I see this thing pushing for 190 very soon. It looks very bullish on the weekly. 190 is a nice target. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 180. As of right now, it favors the bulls, and I think it's going to see 190 soon. For Microsoft, I think that it has dropped a bit, but it has a gap to fill above from the last time I checked. We could be looking for a push right over here towards this like 375 area. We still have this gap. I think it's going to fill this gap and push it for like 375 very soon. I favor the upside as it's been range bound, but just to be safe, let's see what CPI causes. If we're bullish, watch it push it for 375. If we're bearish, you want to see it come down to 360 at the 200 EMA. My gut tells me the upside is going to be favored. For AMD, I'm going to be looking for another push to the upside. I think that 135 is a real possibility. If it keeps breaking out, watch for 141 plus. I think there's a good chance of that potentially playing out. AMD is still holding up nicely. It managed to get above our resistance at that 132 area. I was thinking in my video from yesterday, it would test 132 and possibly see a rejection because that's where we had some tight resistance in the past. That's where this thing rejected in the past, but it managed to break it. So we could be approaching our next resistance in the 140 to 141 area. Could push a little bit more, but make sure you watch it carefully. It is a little bit overbought, but we'll see what CPI causes. I also want to add that the VIX, it's still flat. It's not really looking bullish to me yet. It hasn't broken out at all. It's still looking very flat. It's basically stuck at 12. No sign of a true breakout yet. Same thing on the SQQQ. The dollar is trying to push, but it's still below the 200 EMA. This is going to be a big test. Do we break 104.3 or do we end up rejecting and coming down to 103.7? We'll just have to wait and see. Coinbase has this gap above to fill. It might try to push back up towards 146.5. If we lose 132, however, I would turn more bearish and I think it's going to start sinking. As of right now, it has not officially broken down, and CPI is going to be another big factor. On the 4 hour, I think it's the 4 hour 200 EMA. I could be wrong. I think it's actually the daily 200 EMA or the weekly. I think I just forgot. Sorry about that, guys. The weekly chart it is. So on the weekly, we have the 200 EMA at this 168 area. It could have come down just a bit and try pushing up. We already got the drop in a very healthy fashion. We have a gap above. Let's see if CPI launches this higher alongside other crypto related news or if this thing gets a rug pull. Might try to fill the gap and push up a little bit, and we'll see if it breaks 150. If that happens, watch that 167 area on the weekly. Alibaba, as long as it holds 70, I think it's going to be testing 75. It has to hold 70, though. If it loses 70, I turn back to bearish. If it holds it, I'm going to be looking for a push for 75. For Google, we have a gap to fill. Let me check where that gap is again. It happens to be above. I think Google might try to push back up towards 140. CPI could be the factor that helps this thing out as we're seeing liquidity grabs right here. And also because of the fact that the daily is looking bullish, just like that of Amazon. So the daily candlestick looks a little bullish. We have a gap to fill right over here. I think it might try to fill this gap and push up and get closer to 140. For Amazon, I think that we have a bullish looking daily candlestick. We could be making our way back up to 147.5. If that breaks, watch for a push up to like 149. Retail is eyeing a possible head and shoulders right here, like pattern. I don't know if it's going to play out, guys. We'll just have to wait and see. It might not play out. It could be a trap for retail. They could just push this higher just to trick lots of investors. I wouldn't rule that out for the end of the year. Meta came down to our target of the 50 EMA on the daily time frame, but it bounced. So we'll see if Meta could break out past 332 and start pushing up higher, or if this thing gets rejected and starts sinking back down below 320. My gut tells me it's going to try to hold up, but CPI is going to be another factor. Let's see if we can break 332 or not. The daily time frame is starting to crawl a little bit, but I'd still be a little patient with this and see how it reacts to the 50. And then let's just wait and see and give it some time because once again, CPI is going to be the biggest factor, at least for like the more immediate term. So with that being said, guys, thank you all so much for listening. I know Tesla was kind of weak today because of some external pieces of news, which I personally could not have predicted. But what I can tell you is that as long as there's nothing too horrendous that happens tomorrow, which is unlikely, I think that CPI could be a big factor affecting Tesla. And I think the odds favor CPI helping the market launch back up. So we could see Tesla turn green tomorrow and try to push back up thanks to CPI. Now, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know with 100% certainty what CPI is going to be. But looking at the data I showed you, right, I'm trying to be unbiased when I show you this. There's a very good chance we may get a decent CPI, and I think that I still favor that, and I favor more upside for the markets, as crazy as that may sound. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. I hope this video was very insightful and very helpful, and we'll see how it goes tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Enjoy the evening, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning to report what happens with CPI. Thank you all so much. Tesla to the moon alongside the whole market, as the long term is still very bright, and peace out.